Let's talk about your background so that people will listen to you about exercise, and talk about how your big brain and the school you went to and all that stuff, so that we can also they can also know that you're not just a dumb jock. So
A little history on me. I grew up in Southern California, youngest of three boys. Played football, played sports growing up, and tended to kind of gravitate, because my older brothers did it, into playing football, and started lifting weights when I was 14 years old. I was a skinny, 6'1", 165 when I was 14. And by the time I left high school, I think I was like 6'4", like 255, 260. So I gained close to 100 pounds and grew 4 inches in high school, and ended up earning a scholarship to go play football. Went to UC Berkeley. I think I had like 100 scholarship offers, and took trips to SC, UCLA, Colorado, Nebraska, and Berkeley. Selected to go to Berkeley just because, I guess, as I think back on it now, my next door neighbor when we were growing up was a guy named Dr. Wilson, and Dr. Wilson was an orthopedic surgeon, and my dad generally considered him to be probably one of the smartest people he'd ever met in his life, just in terms of retention. And, my dad was a practicing attorney, and actually really smart dude. Graduated high school at 16, graduated college at 20, and was a practicing attorney by the time he was like 22, 23 years old. And then did that his entire life. So I think he was, over 55 years as a practicing attorney.
and what type of law did he do again? I mean,
Criminal.
Like a family.
Yeah,
court.
no.
Yeah.
No, he was a criminal. My dad, my dad had passed away 2 years ago, and he did a lot of big time murder stuff. So he did a lot of Murder One, which is really pretty ugly shit. And ironically, you would think for all the lawyers in the world that there would be a lot of people that do that stuff, and there isn't. It's a very, very small percentage, like less than 10 or 15 lawyers actually handle the majority of that really nasty Murder One type of stuff. And my dad was one of those guys, and he was on a group that handled the majority of that stuff, because a lot of lawyers either don't have the aptitude, the stomach, or the skill, or just the ability to separate from this ugliness. And my dad was very skilled in that way, and also my brother does the exact same thing. So it's kind of funny, whenever I talk to my brother, he's like, when I go out and I'm interviewed on these, to be able to defend these people, I really run into the same lawyers just day after day. It's always this very, very small group of individuals. And when my dad passed away, my brother has a cell phone from his office, and he's like, it's pretty amazing. I'll get phone calls, and then they'll get phone calls to your dad, and he still gets phone calls. He's like, he's been dead 2 years, and he could still have a thriving practice, just because there aren't people that do that stuff. So that's what I thought I was going to do. I had, when I went to college, I was a rhetoric major, English philosophy with an argumentative approach. An old lawyer, a guy named Adrian Cragen, who was dean of the Bolt Hall Law School that I met as a young man, told me that to be successful as an attorney, you need to be the best reader and writer that possible. So you need to do a major that really prioritizes that. So that's what I did in college. I read endless amounts of books and wrote, and that was really my passion. So when I was graduated in 4 years, and then I did my master's in education in my 5th year, because I needed a 1-year master's program to finish my last year of football. So I was actually taking LSATs, getting ready to go to Bolt Hall, because they had the Adrian Cragen Scholarship, which was an endowment for a 4-year Berkeley letterman to be able to go to Bolt. And that's what I was kind of gearing up for. Figured I would be an attorney and follow within my brother and my dad's footsteps into our family business. And then I got drafted to go play in the NFL. So I was the fourth. I got drafted in the 4th round. I was the 2nd pick in the 4th round. I was like the 100th pick to the Philadelphia Eagles in '99, and went out to Philadelphia and said, hey, I'll go out and play in the NFL for a little bit, make some money, and come back to law school. So went out to Philly and ended up becoming pretty good, and actually starting my first game as a rookie. Went out in my very first game as a rookie. At the end of the first half, stepped in a seam and actually ruptured my patellar tendon. So I came in, they stitched my knee up, and basically told me that nobody had ever come back from this injury, and I should probably think about doing something else. And I was like, great, I'll gladly go back to law school and get the hell out of this Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, which reminded me more of Gotham City than anything. And so I started rehabbing my knee, and that really took me on this journey of not only self-discovery, but also of human performance and understanding a lot of what, really understand like what a lot of people just don't know and don't understand and can't comprehend. And I didn't really have anything to do. So I just sunk myself into the strength conditioning deal, and worked with a guy named Mauro De Pasquale on diet, and, you know, Charlie Francis, and just a lot of these individuals, and developed a training system and a rehab, and really just decided that if I was going to heal myself and I was going to become the best version of myself so that I could walk away from this game and be healthy and strong and go to law school, I was going to have to do it myself, that there was nobody that was going to take me on this journey. And I ended up putting that into practice and came back and ended up starting 16 games the next year at left guard after I started at right tackle, and then went on to play another, I guess after that would have been another 8-9 years in the NFL. So I ended up with 10 years in the NFL, played 5 years in Philadelphia, 4 in Kansas City, and then my 10th year was in New England. And retired in 2009. And shortly after I got hurt, which kind of ended my career in my 10th year with the Patriots, I got hurt in the last preseason game. I came home, had knee surgery, and was rehabbing, and I was approached by a small company at the time about helping them develop their technology and how to train athletes. And that company ended up growing and becoming a fitness phenomenon known as CrossFit. So CEO of CrossFit, Greg Glassman, hits me up and asks me to not only design my own version of CrossFit, but actually they licensed me to design my own version of CrossFit, and then asked me to go out and teach this methodology and try to teach people how to use CrossFit principles, the idea of, you know, functional movements performed at high intensity and all these other, you know, class-meeting statements on how to train athletes. And what I was most enamored with was the community of individuals, not necessarily all the other, you know, ancillary bullshit associated with CrossFit. I was really fascinated by this group of individuals, this large cross-section of individuals that were non-professional athletes that wanted to understand performance training. So when CrossFit asked me, what do you think about our style of training as a you know, vehicle for performance? And I'm like, well, it doesn't adhere to any of the principles of athleticism the way that I understand them. It's all sagittal plane. No, everything is just bilateral hip hinging over and over again. So the problem comes down to when you're developing these movement patterns over and over ad nauseum, you don't really develop anything. And anybody that's ever played a sport will tell you that the few things that ever happen is anybody runs right at you. Right. And it involves a lot more than just bilateral hip hinging, squatting. Right. So the way I understand athleticism, you know, there's different primal movements. There's really 7 things that our bodies can do. And then you have to adhere to these principles to be able to be successful. And because that program did not adhere to what my model for athleticism was, I just deemed it as unathletic. You know, you can make people extremely fit doing the same thing over and over again, but to foster and develop athleticism, there has to be these key components.
Well, you can make them fit for doing that same thing over and over again.
Yeah, you can have somebody just do more air squats. Well, I mean, based off the definition of CrossFit, if I can do 50 air squats today and I do 51 tomorrow and 52, technically I'm increasing my fitness.
Right.
But the problem is
you're increasing your ability to do air squats in a finite amount of time, and not necessarily anything to do with your athleticism. Probably, you know, closer tied to overall fitness, you know, strength, and we just think of the generalized ideas of fitness being strength and endurance. Then it would be more tied to that, but not really athleticism in any sense. And I believe is what you're saying. So I interrupted you, but so that was the end of your CrossFit, and then you blended into now.
Well, so when I started working with CrossFit, my company, I was teaching a seminar and a training system for them called CrossFit Football. My company that I started in parallel as my holding company and, you know, my base company was called Power Athlete. And over time, as the training, and I kind of ran into more and more kind of see how I put this. So I put out a free workout system, like a program called CrossFit Football. And I think the first day we launched, we had about 17,000 hits. And I ended up, you know, programming like 1 million workouts. I mean, it was just like an astronomical amount of workouts for free. And we had thousands of people from all around the globe following this training system. And then we booked anywhere from 24 to 40 seminars a year, almost every weekend. We traveled all over the world teaching the CrossFit football methodology in person to people that were actually doing the program. So we would show up to Stockholm, Sweden, and there'd be 40 people there. 35 of them had been doing our program, 5 of them hadn't. And then over the course of the years, as the program increased, we'd go to like Cape Town, and we would go to, Cincinnati, Ohio, and we'd go to New York, and then, everywhere, all over. I think we hit 140 cities. The people that did our training system were dramatically better in terms of athleticism, strength, power, speed, and just overall physical appearance than the people that hadn't been doing it, that had just been doing standard CrossFit. So I could walk in and I would know within a minute who had been doing our training program. As soon as we started doing our warm-ups and our movement stuff, I knew exactly who was doing our training program. And then I found the people that hadn't been doing our training program, that had been doing more of a standard CrossFit template, couldn't do any of our stuff. And at that point, after you see this over the course of almost a decade and hundreds of times, I taught 200 seminars and worked with, thousands of athletes over the course of that period of time, and owned a gym at the same time, and was writing and blogging and traveling and doing all the other stuff, and working as a contractor for Naval Special Warfare. All of a sudden, when you start seeing this much data and this much information coming through, you start finding these, veins of truth in these things where everything starts getting clumped into these little pieces. And then you start going back and then looking at it and saying, okay, what do these people do? If this guy can't run and change direction, why is it he can't run and change direction? Well, it's because that's never been discussed or never been really stressed within this training program. And then you start understanding that like a complete training program looks a very certain way. And then you start understanding that, training for fitness is not training for athleticism. You can be extremely fit and unathletic. You can be extremely athletic and unfit. And those are, mutually exclusive. So it just became really a focus for my company and for me with Power Athlete, focusing on performance, not necessarily fitness. Fitness is personal to everybody. Anybody listening to this, in your head, I want you to take and think about, like, what do you think fitness is? Like, how do you judge your fitness? How do you gauge fitness? How does fitness important to you? I mean, I spoke at the Ancestral Health Symposium, and there was Dr. Lieberman, who's the guy that really put the barefoot running at the forefront. And he talked about fitness, and he talked about it from a biological standpoint. Fitness is your ability to reproduce. When they look at different animals or whatever it is within biology, fitness is purely based off of your idea to reproduce. And he made a joke, and he's like, how many kids do you guys, how many people have 1 kid, 2 kid, 3 kid? And he raised his hands. I got 3. And then he showed a picture of like Mitt Romney, who's got like 8 kids. And he's like, Mitt Romney's the fittest person in this room. Now, we don't know anything about, his mile time, his Fran time, what he can do, nothing. It was just purely based off of his ability to reproduce. So with that, I really took this idea that fitness is very personal. The fitness that I needed at 23 and 25 and 27 is very different than the fitness I needed at 43. Doc, your fitness today looks a lot different than it was when you were a SEAL. Right. And because fitness is very personal, just throwing an overarching, increased work capacity, broad time modal domains type of deal is extremely self-serving and doesn't really service the individual. So what I wanted to do is create a performance matrix and say, hey, performance is the end goal. Was the training successful for what I wanted to use it for? And that's really became Power Athlete's focus.
So that's a nice segue. Thanks for giving me that underhand toss there. Because today what we really want to talk about is the fitness in terms of being able to sustain this period of upheaval that we're currently going through, that
sure,
whatever we're calling it, as you said at the beginning, this the COVID pandemic or whatever we're calling this right now, obviously has a lot of people stuck at home, with not access to gyms. Some unfortunate places don't can't even go to parks and and trails and stuff like that. So currently people are having to figure out one, well, let's back up. So to be honest, what we're really worried about in this isn't people getting sick, right? People are getting, if this were just, everybody coughed and felt short of breath and then felt better, ran a fever and then felt better, no one would be talking about this. We're worried about people dying, right? So we know that the number one thing that's leading, the single independent risk variable or risk factor is age, right? That's the most important variable. The older you are, the more likely you are to die from anything. And of course, a respiratory infection is going to be harder on you than it would be, if you're 80, it's going to be harder on you than it would be if you're 20.
Well, Rob and I talked about this yesterday, Rob Wolf. There came out some really interesting research where they were looking at that they think that maybe this COVID-19 deal where they've been kind of not misdiagnosing it, but they're not seeing the people, or maybe it's changing. But before there was this idea that people were going to die of pneumonia. That it was, standard pneumonia, fluid on the lungs type of deal, and the lungs are going to fill with fluid. They're not necessarily seeing that. And what Rob talked about is that more what they're seeing is effects that look like hypoxic kind of situations where the COVID-19 is attacking the red blood cells, and now the red blood cells can't bring oxygen to the lungs.
Yeah, and that's why the anti-malarial drugs work, because malaria does the same thing. It infects red blood cells and affects their ability to carry oxygen when they rupture. This is actually affecting the heme groups in the oxygen and not allowing people to exchange oxygen, which is why the ventilators are turning out to be not all that useful.
Well, because they're hooking these guys up to these ventilators, and what they're doing is they're pumping up the ventilators, and all the ventilators are doing is pressure testing the lungs and actually damaging it and hurting the lungs. So
and that would hurt anybody's lungs. It would hurt the healthiest person's lungs. Yeah, and only about 15 to 20% of people who go on ventilators are making it off of ventilators.
Yeah. So the idea is probably never at any point in this world, and especially with this pandemic, the determining factor for survival is going to be, your fitness level, how strong you are, how physically able you are, how fast you can take, lung capacity and turn it into oxygen, and how much, like your red blood cell count. So, I mean, we're really looking at these things that it's definitely weeding out not only people that have pre-existing conditions with like obesity, with diabetes and other issues that already have something, but also people that are extremely unhealthy or unfit, smokers, people that vape, people that have, already something that's putting them kind of, stacking the deck against them.
Basically anybody who, if you think of the body as a finite resource for sustaining, for dealing with the disease, part of that is how good your immune system is, and we'll talk about that in a second. But part of that is just how robust is your how robust are your resources, because the more taxes you have on you. So if you're diabetic, well, cha-ching, you just lost 30% of your energy stores right there. Sure. If you have some serious gut issues, if you have ulcerative colitis or Crohn's or some autoimmunity or something, bam, sure. You've taken away part of your immune system. If you're obese, obese is an endocrine. Fat's an endocrine organ. It affects your endocrine system. It affects your overall hormones, affects your overall wellness and being. So, anything that you add to the puzzle, if you're one of those people that is unfortunate enough to have a severe reaction to this, there could be some blood typing issues in there. There could be some genetics in there. There could be a viral load issue. Of course, aging. All of that stuff affects you. The more you have going against you when you get this, the more likely you are to have a bad outcome from it, right? You just have fewer resources. So what I've been trying to talk to people about is, regardless of your opinion on this, if you think this is the worst pandemic known to man, and you have concerns it's going to wipe everybody out, or if if you think this is a conspiracy, or if you think it's no big deal, it doesn't really matter. The truth is,
regardless of what you believe, this is our reality. People are sheltering in place and people are here, so we can either, like there's rabbit holes, like I love the conspiracy talk. Like the conspiracy theory stuff to me is like so fucking bat brain crazy, that like the whole 5G cell phone tower one, like that's like the new flat earth. It's just,
I'm with you on that. I actually have a buddy who I agree with for the most part about the coronavirus. And he and I have been talking for over a month about this. about, looking back at historical precedents to say like how likely is this to kill millions of people, which was the prediction back then. Not based on modeling, but just based on history, and how much worse would this virus have to be than anything else we've ever seen to have this out, whatever. So we've been talking about that, and he went full down the 5G, releasing exosomes, and exosomes being, mistaken for coronavirus and the PCR test because it's finding the mRNA from an exosome instead of from the virus. And so he and I disagree over that. He's a super smart guy. I respect his opinion. I respect Peter Attia's opinion. He's a super smart guy. He and I disagree on this too. So, it's
does Peter Attia is he in the 5G camp?
No, not at all. But Peter Attia is much more of a doomsdayer about this. Has had this serious concern about, tens of millions of deaths in America, or maybe not tens of millions. Maybe, I want to say like 4 to 6 million kind of was at the beginning. He's settled down over time though. And as the models keep proving themselves to be over predicting, the closer the more information we know, the bigger the numbers that going into the model, the more data going into the model, the more that number starts coming down.
Sure.
So yeah, all that stuff, people can believe whatever they want. But the fact of the matter is, like you said, we're at home. A lot of people are stuck at home. A lot of people don't have a lot of access to other things. And the most important things people can do to prevent themselves from being a victim of this, or the ones they love, they're people they love and care about becoming a victim, is to focus on their own health, and to encourage the health of other people. So I've been interviewing people and talking about sort of the 4 pillars of health. Obviously, I harp a lot on sleep. I'm interviewing Rob about nutrition and immunity. And there's obviously stress mitigation, and I specifically wanted to talk to you about how people can exercise at home. And some people have obviously never exercised. They're not athletic and they're not fit. But if they want to boost their immune system, they're going to have to exercise during this. If they want to be as healthy as they can, maybe they get this virus 6 months from now or 9 months from now. Like they could achieve a lot of physiologic change through exercise. So yeah, the first thing I just wanted to, I know you guys have developed a program and we can talk about that along the way, but first thing I just wanted to know is, if someone is exercise naive, or just, hasn't been training a lot, we know men in particular get big beer guts and they haven't exercised in 10 years, but they still think they're close to where they were. They're just a few pounds overweight. And those people are obviously going to overdo it. So, if they do it at all, they're going to overdo it. So, can you kind of give a gauge of like, if somebody, isn't already fairly fit, and knows that this is, or, their fitness isn't anywhere near what they think it should be, how do they know how to get into this without completely overdoing it and actually decreasing their immune system by overtraining?
I think if your exercise journey in the last, say 3 to 5 years looks like zilch, I think it just starts with just getting off the couch and going for a walk. Let's set something up where, what's the easiest thing that you can do in this environment? You don't have to go to a gym. You don't have to do this. It was probably just, I need you to go out and probably just take anywhere from a 15 to 20 minute walk, and then eventually be able to push that to, hey, can I walk at a brisk pace for 20 minutes? Can I walk at a brisk pace for 25, 30, 40, 45 minutes? And just getting out and moving within nature. Vitamin D, just, some, changing your environment, getting out and, just seeing trees and sky and just getting out of your house and taking a nice walk, I think is really the starting point for most people if you have no, physical training background, or if this is just something you've been away from. What ends up, and there's 2 things I think about. The majority of heart attacks, when they look at men that have heart attacks, usually come on vacation. So what happens is guys don't exercise. They decide to go on vacation. They decide to get up. Hey, I'm going to go up and get up and, for a run. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do some stuff. And because they're unfit, they end up going on vacation. They go on a run. They hit the gym and end up coming back and having a heart attack in a hotel room. So there's a pretty good instance of that one, especially for people that are untrained who just decide, you know what, I'm on vacation. I'm going to go hard today. And they end up not really building up into it. So that one becomes a major key factor. The other one is when they looked at risk of heart attack, they had all these different tests from everything from like blood work, and they were doing VO2 max tests and stress testing, and they had all of these different things, and they couldn't necessarily pinpoint and predict heart attack based off of all this information. And then they just started actually doing a control where they were asking people to do one set of max reps push-ups.
Right.
And as your push-ups went up, like if you could do less than 5 push-ups, you had like a 40% chance of a heart attack. If you could get 10 push-ups, it went down to 35. And then as it went up, and if you could do 40 straight push-ups, your chance of a heart attack was like 0.01%. So what it meant to show was that there was a correlation between not only upper body strength, but to be able to bang out 40 push-ups, you have to be consistently training. So it just was kind of a very simple indicator. So I remember reading that research, and you can find it. I mean, I think last time I saw it was on Science Alert. If you Google, heart attack risk for push-up Science Alert, it'll pop up and you can read the research.
To be clear, just training on push-ups isn't going to prevent your heart attack risk. That's really that's where jogging came from, because the stress test was the predictor. So people started running to be able to do well in the stress test. So you have to be fit enough to just do 40 push-ups without training to do 40 push-ups all the time.
Well, to be able to do 40 push-ups, you have to be doing a lot of other things too. Right. So I remember when I read the research, we all kind of looked around and we all just laid down. I did like 50 straight push-ups. I'm like, woohoo, thank God I'm not going to die of a heart attack. No, it's not that simple.
Right.
Those are just two predictors. So if somebody has no experience getting in the training space, I just need you to get out and walk. And, if you can get out and take a brisk walk, like my mom is 80 years old, and I got her an Apple Watch, and it measures her steps. And so right now she's averaging like 15 to 17,000 steps a day, and she's walking like 36 miles a week.
Man, she makes me look bad. I'm only getting like 10,000.
so she but we started her, hey mom, the goal is 10,000 steps. Yeah. So she was at 10,000 steps, and then she's like, I'm getting this pretty consistently. So then we pushed her to 12 and then to 14, and then she's now at 17, and she's logging like, I think she's at 5.5 to 6 miles a day is what she ends up walking. She does like 2-3 mile walks. So she gets up in the morning and she walks, she comes back, and then she walks later. And, and then we got her a Peloton bike for Christmas. So she'll ride like the Peloton bike like 1 or 2 days a week. And, and for her at 80 years old, like she is extremely fit. If you met her, you'd think she was in her 60s. And, she is, fitness is important to her, and she wants to be healthy. She doesn't want to have to ask people for help for anything. And that's a big deal. And, she's super fit. And like, I just see like just some small marker, like she has the watch, we have the numbers. Now, whether or not it's accurate or not, it doesn't matter, because it's something for her to train for. It's something performance-based that she can go out, and it's a measure that she can say, hey, I hit 10,000 steps today. And then that was easy. Now I want to do this. And there's just some small little milestones. For somebody like her, and for probably a lot of people that are listening to this, just getting outside and walking, like, hey, I walked for 20 minutes at a good pace. I didn't have to stop. Now I'm going to push it out. I think what happens is that people kind of hit that set point and they don't continue to progress it. And so the minute that you stop progressing, all of a sudden your body, acclimates, and next thing you know, the training effect is nil.
So how do people know if they're going too far, too fast, too far? Right? Which I think, I'm thinking of like the 45 to 55-year-olds who are still pretty strong and agile, but haven't been working out and going, man, I'm getting close to that dangerous age for this. I'm going to go bust it out and get 6-pack abs in the next 6 weeks, Like, how do people know if they're overdoing this at the beginning?
I think if you go out and you take... Is it possible
to overdo with walking? Yeah, is it even possible to overdo walking?
Yeah, I mean, on a flat surface, I think, if you're going out and like hiking or rucking, or you're, trying to climb a mountain, it's very difficult to run up in that situation. But I think as long as you're like walking at a brisk pace and you can walk for 20 minutes and not have to stop and rest, I think you're probably in pretty good deal. I think where people get themselves into trouble is actually with jogging and trying to run. I really like walking in terms of like walking out in nature and just getting out and maybe finding a great trail. And I think that to me is by far the best form of building up some like low level aerobic capacity. I think if you can get out and you can walk and you come back and the next day you don't have any terrible muscle soreness and like there's no pain in the knees and the ankles and you feel like you're the Tin Man, you need to find a container of oil. I think you're on the right track. If all of a sudden you come back and you're smoked, you had to stop 2 or 3 times, and the next day you get up and you feel like you're hit by a train, you probably went too far, and you probably need to either reduce the volume or reduce the speed or change your shoes or find a different terrain or do something to adjust it. The idea, the old mantra that exercise has to be painful, it does, but that comes later on. A lot of times what we find is that if the exercise is too strenuous and it's too damaging up front, people tend to have the lowest levels of adherence. So we know this even within the training programs. My company, Power Athlete, we do large group performance training. Like we went in and worked with like the 18th Airborne Corps, which was 90,000 troops. We've worked with, Texas National Guard. We've also, gone in and I've worked as a contractor for Naval Special Warfare, teaching performance to the SEAL teams for almost 10 years. And then we certified, thousands of coaches over the course of years, actually going and doing large group performance training. In 2012, I started putting programs online, and as really just an experiment. I had theories that I wanted to have flesh out on training, like things like post-activation potentiation, blood flow restriction, and just a lot of like interesting things that I'd come across that I wanted to test the efficacy of. And so I created an online portal and had, up to, I think when we first started, within a 6 months time, we had about 1,200 people following my training programs. And then what I was doing is I was using it as really a test, and was able to data mine all their results and test whether or not the programs were doing what I thought they were. At which point when all of a sudden we hit about 1,200 people, it was just pretty overwhelming, just the amount of like transaction and information that was coming over a day. And we started looking at designing an app and developing something really high end. And right as we were going through that process, I was approached by a company called Train Heroic that asked us to partner with them to help them develop what we were looking to do. So we partnered with them. And right now we deliver training programs to about 5,000 people around the world that are following different versions in our different programs. Some of them are, very, very athletically based performance programs like Field Strong. And then we have, like a standard bodybuilding program like Jack Street. But one of the things that we were asked to do for the 18th Airborne Corps was not only design a performance training deal, but also a program which we called, or they called it the austere training program. So guys go on deployment, they go out into these austere locations, and a lot of times they don't have access to lifting weights or standard barbell implements. Right. So they asked us to develop a training system that utilized what they would have available at these locations. And when we asked for like, okay.
Very COVID-like.
Very COVID-like. So when this whole thing happened and people started sheltering in place, we already had a program, online, not necessarily put out to the public, but we had built this entire program for, really the U.S. Army, for 1/3 of the U.S. Army to implement based off of these austere locations. And it looks like about $50 worth of equipment that you can get at Home Depot that involves cinder blocks, some bungee cords, a bag of cement, and a bunch of 5-gallon buckets. And we developed this whole program. And not only did we develop it, well, we tested it with the guys, in the U.S. military for, almost 6, 7, 8 months, almost a year. So we knew exactly what we wanted to do and how it all looked. So when the COVID-19 deal dropped out, the guys, were like, what do you think we do? I'm like, I'd say we launched the austere program. And so we provided it for free. If you go to powerathletehq.com/COVID, COVID, it'll take you to a landing page. You submit your email, and we actually email you the workouts every day, and it shows up with workout demos. And it's really just, we handhold you through the entire training system, and it requires about $50 worth of stuff that you can get at your Home Depot, and or you might just have laying around your house.
As long as Home Depot is open, people are set. No, yeah. Is this actually called Third Monkey, or that's an internal dialogue?
No, it's we call it the Third Monkey. So where that comes from is I have a training it's so my offline training, the stuff that I do that I test, I call Big Monkey because I'm the big monkey. And the big monkey conversation comes from something like a conversation I had with a guy named Nicholas Romanoff. Romanoff was or is the head of and the inventor of the pose method of running. And I had a great breakfast conversation with him years ago where we talked about this idea of like volume versus intensity. And he related it to like big monkeys and small monkeys that in Russia, they did a test where they observed different monkeys, and certain monkeys played and swung and battled and fought and, just moved 20 hours a day. And then when it was time to rest, they rested. And then there were other monkeys that only moved enough to eat. So like they like conserved energy and they would only move just enough to eat. So what they did is they switched the environments. The monkeys that moved 20 hours a day, that wanted to battle and fight and swing and play all the time, they locked them in cages. And then they took the little monkeys, the ones that only moved enough to eat, and forced them through these extreme, like these, mazes, and had them do all these challenges to get to their food. And the monkeys that like hadn't been used to moving, they were forced to move, just ended up laying down and dying. And the big monkeys that were locked in cages, as soon as they got out, they went over and they beat each other to death. So the theory was that there's like big monkeys and there's small monkeys. And he used the analogy in terms of like, your metabolic system, that certain sports and certain individuals require a ton more movement and like just effort and, or just big monkeys that can handle more volume. And then there's people that are smaller monkeys that don't. And we went into athletes. I played in the NFL, which is definitely a big monkey sport. You have to be able to handle a high amount of training over a long period of time just to get to the position of getting out on the field. So it just kind of naturally selects for these big monkeys. So that's where the big monkey comes from. So my training is called Big Monkey because I'm a big monkey, but I'm also the head monkey, which is kind of funny here. So it was just kind of some tongue in cheek, but the joke for the third monkey comes from a quote that I saw, and I can't remember the writer, talked about like, hey, you gotta like in life, you gotta, or I forgot the analogy, but basically like, if you buy into the story of the ark that, the animals went 2 by 2. So 2 monkeys were up and you were the third monkey in line trying to get on the ark, and all of a sudden it started raining. So you better fight like you're the third monkey. So I read this quote years ago. And so I have 3 kids. So I always tell my son all the time, I'm like, you got to fight like the third monkey at all times. You're the third of these things. So it's something I've been saying to my kids for a long, long time. And then when the program came out, they were like, well, what should we call it? And I ended up just coming up and I was like, wow, we should call it something, Big Monkey. I'm like, no, it's not Big Monkey because it's not, and I was like, third monkey. So that's how the third monkey came up. You got to train like you're the third monkey on the ark, and it just started raining.
And that's the austere program. So if people download the Train Heroic app, they can find that. They can find
So
third monkey programming.
Yeah. So if they go to trainheroic.com and they go to the marketplace, they can search for Third Monkey, and that actually has all the jiggy stuff, which has the app. And then, but that's you got to pay for all like that piece. So those are our paid programs. So for $15, but you get an app, you get tracking, you get community. It's all the really, really cool like features. But for the people that, were, going in some economic hardships, or the people that, didn't necessarily want to get into it, if you want to download it for free, and it's just basically, give us your email, send it to your inbox daily. So it's really just comes down to what you want. If you just want to get an email and do the training, or if you want, all the really cool kind of, features of Train Heroic,
which is like do you compete against other people?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a huge community associated with it. Coaches are on there coaching. So if you post your movement demos, you'll get feedback on it. There's not only a ton of video demos, but like it's really a pretty good virtual training environment. Like if people are looking for a virtual community, what we've set up, I think, is second to none.
And this is the one where you actually have videos of like, hey, go to Home Depot, buy this, buy that, buy that. And I'm sure you're agnostic whether it's Lowe's or Home Depot, right?
Yeah. No, well, the hilarious part is when we went and like we had all the stuff here to build it, because I had cinder blocks, we had the we had everything here within at my place here in Texas, and so we developed because we had developed the program probably 2 years ago, so we still had all the stuff. But then we had to actually film the demo of us going and rebuying it at Home Depot. So
Right,
it's
right.
pretty funny. There's a good video of Luke and Tex, who worked for me, actually going to Home Depot and buying all this stuff. So like they brought it back, and I was like, man, we got more of this stuff. So we'll either build something with it or give it to some people that need it.
So if somebody goes to Train Heroic and actually signs up on the platform, pays the $15, then they'll be part of that platform infinitum. They get,
Yeah.
and they can then scale up to your other programs. You have lots of other programs on there,
Yeah.
right? With
Yeah.
similar features.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, the other cool program that we have, which is really by far my favorite, is a program that I wrote called Grindstone. That was based on, I had a private client who was a Fortune 500 CEO, ran the largest privately owned mortgage company in the country. And he hired me to not only be an advisor for him and his family to build, help him build the gym and make sure his kids were on point, but he wanted me to develop a kind of a flexible training program where he could, follow, but it could be done really based on uh, like mandatory days, recommended days, and optional days, because his travel schedule was so dynamic. So like a lot of days, Saturday and Sunday were his mandatory days, and then he would travel on Monday to 800 locations. And so then we had these recommended and optional, and I kind of set up what I call the flexible program, where it was based off of like, hey, what is your first available training day? This is mandatory A. Your second available training day is mandatory B. And then all the other ones kind of cascade effect. And as long as you give me at least those 2 hard training days, we can kind of backfill. And, those 2 minimal those 2 mandatory days are like the minimal effective dose. All the other stuff just is plugged in based on need. Because then you kind of home for a week and have a week off, or, hey, I got 4 days this week and 3 days this week. And so when I started writing this program, I was like, okay, well, this is what I need you to do at a minimum. And then if we can get these recommended and optional, we can get 5 solid training days. We know we kicked ass. But I don't want you to feel like if I only got 2, we were going backwards. And that program, which I call Grindstone, because this dude's nose was on the grindstone, that I developed for him, I ended up launching on Train Heroic as well. And it's really been an excellent program for not only for, single or not single, but new fathers that all of a sudden have kids for the first time. I've been training super hard, but now all of a sudden I got a little one in the house. People who have 80 hours a week and they're training in their garage, but they want to still come and get it done. Or people like my client who are very successful individuals that have a very dynamic schedule. So really, that program became something I developed for one person and put out, and now there's thousands of people that follow it that fit within more of my demographic, that are over 40, have kids, have a life, but still want to get out and bang it pretty hard, still want to train with athleticism and adhere to the power athlete principles.
Cool. And is that where you prefer to send people, to Train Heroic or powerathlete.com as well?
HQ, yeah. So if you go to powerathletehq.com, you can see all of the information about these training programs. There's blogs. I got years of this stuff. So we've been around for let's say I retired from the NFL in 2009. I started this company in 2009. So we're going on a number of years that we've been doing this stuff. Right on. So I think we, and I'm not just saying it because it's my company, and we did, the guys that work for me put this stuff together with myself. Is I think it's the best stuff in the world. And not only do we have the numbers to say it, but some of the best people in the world follow our stuff for a reason.
Yeah, well, you got a testimonial out of me. There's a reason I drive an hour a day to work out at your place. When I live, walking distance to probably 10 gyms. All right, man. Well, thanks for your time today. We're gonna post this up. We'll make sure that my team talks to yours about any sort of show notes or links that you want to put in there. We'll make sure that those are all in there for anybody who wants to optimize their health and fitness while they're COVIDing, and then hopefully set some progressive goals after that and stick with you guys and create a larger fitness community.
Sounds great. Thanks, Doc.
All right. Thanks.